Hi, this is Dwayne Marshall, Senior Federal Grant Specialist on the Title Grants and Support Team at your Indiana Department of Education. Our topic for this installment of the INtelligrants video series is funding eligibility. Our main objective for this presentation is to ensure viewers leave with a better understanding of minimum eligibility requirements for federal grants serviced by the Title Grants and Support Team here at the IDOE. Additionally, a brief description of the intents and purposes of each grant will be provided. Those grants include, but are not limited to, Title I Part A, School Improvement Grant 1003, more commonly referred to as SIG 1003, Title II Part A, Title III, Title IV, and Title V Part B, more commonly referred to as RLIS, which stands for Rural Low-Income Schools. Prior to providing you with an introduction to each of the aforementioned grants and delving into eligibility requirements, it's important to first define what is both meant and not meant by the term formula student, as this term will be referenced several times throughout this presentation. Counts of formula students are the single biggest factor in determining both eligibility for a grant and the amount of the allocation itself. A formula student is defined as any child aged 5 to 17 from a family whose income rests below the federal poverty line, as determined by the U.S. Census Bureau, is a foster child, is a child who resides in an institution for orphans or neglected children, or is from a family who receives federal welfare payments through the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families Program, also referred to as TANF. The term formula student is not synonymous with free or reduced lunch student, as criteria for each are far different. While a student from a family whose income is below the federal poverty line would certainly qualify for free or reduced lunch, not every student who qualifies for free or reduced lunch is from a family whose income is below the federal poverty line. Further illustrate the relationship between census poverty data and formula students, note that between 95 to 97% of formula children nationwide are composed of those who are identified by the U.S. Census Bureau as being from a family whose income is below the federal poverty line. Title I, Part A of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, as amended by the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, provides financial assistance to local educational agencies with high numbers or high percentages of children from low-income families to help ensure that all children meet challenging state academic standards. The term Local Education Agency, or LEA, most commonly refers to traditional public school districts or non-traditional schools, such as charter schools. Title I is the largest single program of federal aid for elementary and secondary education, with a congressional allocation of nearly $17 billion last year. Indiana's allocation of nearly $270 million supplemented efforts of close to 400 LEAs statewide. Common uses of Title I include, but are not limited to, hiring additional staff, professional development and training for staff, parent involvement programming, extended learning opportunities for students such as the before-school, after-school, or summer school programming, preschool programming, and the purchase of technology or other instructional materials. As the largest single program of federal aid for schools, it is also the most well-known amongst educators. What is less well-known, however, is how a state LEA or school allocation comes to be. For a detailed explanation of how each of these allocations come to fruition, be sure to view the TitleCon 2019 presentation, The Formula Behind the Funding, Title I Part A. The web address can be found at the bottom of our next slide. For our purposes today, we'll just focus on eligibility requirements. Perhaps the most common misconception regarding Title I Part A funding is that allocations are derived from a single formula. In fact, each LEA's Title I allocation is composed of the sum of 4 distinct statutory formulas, each with its own purpose and eligibility requirements. Can you guess what variable plays a direct role in each one? If you guessed formula children, you're correct. Let's take a closer look. The basic grant provides funds to LEAs with no less than 10 formula children, constituting at least 2% of its school-age population. Nearly all LEAs in the state of Indiana meet this minimum eligibility requirement. Concentration grants flow to LEAs with higher concentrated amounts of poverty, as is reflected in its minimum requirement of either 6,500 or more formula children, or 15% of its school population. The targeted and EFIG grants are often paired together in conversation because eligibility requirements for each are identical. Funds from these grants are allocated to LEAs in which the number of formula children is at least 10 and exceeds 5% of its school-age population. The intents and purposes of each are, however, quite different. While the targeted grant is more or less a weighted hybrid of the basic and concentration grants, the EFIG grants, yes, there are technically more than one, are designed to incentivize districts and states that commit higher levels of state and local funds to education and most equitable state and local spending among all districts. Once Title I allocations are distributed to LEAs by the SEA, or State Education Agency, in this case IDOE, it is left to each LEA to identify which schools within their district will be served with Title I Part A dollars. LEAs must observe the following eligibility requirements when identifying schools to be served. Schools must be composed of a 35% low-income population as measured by free or reduced lunch rate. Or, in more affluent districts, schools must be composed of low-income population percentage that is higher than the district free or reduced percentage lunch average. Schools must be served in rank order based upon free or reduced lunch percentage within grade spans. For example, a K-5 elementary school with a lower free or reduced lunch percentage than another K-5 elementary school in the same district may not be allocated a greater per pupil amount than the second K-5 building. Schools with a poverty rate of 75% or greater must be served. Non-public schools receive equitable share based upon the number of Title I eligible students who reside in participating school attendance areas. So, to clarify and recap, formula counts, composed primarily of census poverty counts, determine an LEA's overall allocation, and free or reduced lunch rates determine which schools within each LEA can be served with that money and in what order. School improvement grants, or SIG grants, are funded through a mandatory 7% set-aside of each state education agency's, in this case IDOE's, Title I Part A allocation as determined by the U.S. Department of Education. These grants are intended to support school improvement activities that take new, innovative, and systemic approaches to improving student achievement and school quality in those schools in need of comprehensive support and improvement, also referred to as CSI. Schools designated as CSI are those who are among the lowest performing 5% of Title I schools in the state. In order for a school to be eligible for SIG grant opportunities, it must be among the lowest, achieving 5% of Title I served schools statewide, a public high school, Title I served or not, that fails to graduate 1/3 or greater of its students, or a Title I school in which any subgroup is identified as amongst the lowest performing 5% statewide and has not improved. The purpose of Title II Part A, supporting effective instruction grant, is to increase the academic achievement of all students by helping schools and districts improve teacher and principal quality and effectiveness. Common uses of Title II include teacher and principal professional development, teacher recruitment and retention initiatives, and class size reduction. Said succinctly, all local education agencies serving students between the ages of 5 to 17 are eligible for Title II Part A funding. Unlike Title I Part A, Title II funding may be used to support activities at any school within a district. Non-public schools are eligible for an equitable share of the allocation granted to the traditional LEA in which that non-public school is geographically located, provided that that LEA chooses to pursue funding. The primary objective of Title III is to increase English language proficiency in academic achievement in core academic subjects and to provide high-quality professional development to LEA staff. Title III funds are supplemental and are used above and beyond an LEA's English language development services that are offered to English learners in order to meet the federal requirements for serving EL students, also known as LAW requirements. Funding eligibility for Title III is identical to Title II Part A with a single caveat. To be eligible, an allocation of $10,000 or greater is needed. LEAs with an allocation of less than $10,000 must participate in a consortium whose total allocation summed to $10,000 or more. Like Title II, this funding may be used to support activities at any school within a district. Title IV Part A is a federal funding source broken up into 3 main focus areas under the Every Student Succeeds Act. 3 focus areas of Title IV are intended to support a well-rounded education incorporating advanced classes, fine arts, foreign languages, STEAM, and other innovative programming, create safe and healthy schools through the utilization of social emotional learning and healthy lifestyle habits, and effectively utilize technology through properly preparing staff as well as provide high-quality digital learning experiences for underserved students. Title IV funds are available to all public and charter schools that receive Title I funding, as well as equitable services for non-public schools. It is worth noting that the minimum allocation any eligible LEA can receive is $10,000. The RLIS program is intended to meet the unique needs of rural and low-income districts, providing resources and flexibility to supplement select ESSER priorities. Challenges faced by these districts often include the lack of personnel and resources needed to compete effectively for federal competitive grants and formula grant allocations in amounts too small to be effective in meeting their intended purpose. This funding stream can be used for any activity authorized under Title I, II, III, and IV. RLIS funds are available to any LEA and subsequent non-public school located within an eligible participating LEA's geographical boundaries who meet all of the following criteria. LEA must have participated in Title I Part A in the prior year. 20% or greater of children served, ages 5 to 17, are from families with incomes below the census poverty line and have a locale code of 32, 33, 41, or 43. Note that eligibility for this funding stream is dependent upon census poverty figures rather than free or reduced lunch figures. Not sure what your locale code is or if you meet other aforementioned criteria? Access the fiscal year 2020 REAP Master Eligibility Spreadsheet via the web address below. On behalf of the Indiana Department of Education, we would like to thank you for viewing our video. Should you have any additional questions regarding the information presented in this video or have any questions overall related to INtelligrants, please contact your assigned LEA Federal Grant Specialist, or you may email intelligrants@dle.in.gov. Thank you.